You were travelling with the guys at the time. You were travelling with Brian and Raven at the time.
Yep.
Two of the best minds in the business.
Yeah.
Did that sort of rub off on you for later in life?
No, not really. Not as far as, because we were always on the same page psychology-wise, and Raven, man, that guy's so wacky. We had such a great time. We call ourselves the comedy trio. We'd ride down the road in a van and just basically make fun of each other and tell jokes, and we'd rebook the territory. And Raven is so I don't know, paranoid or whatever the word is for him, but he overthinks things so many times he ends back up with square one after coming up with a killer idea. Then he rethinks it back to what we started with. But we had a blast. And then where Brian did rub off on me was from a promo standpoint, where I was really forced to follow his lead, because you put a microphone in front of Brian's face, and he's had a wonderful vocabulary. He'd express himself without really yelling. I mean, he could yell, yes, but I mean, he could use many different words with a bunch of syllables, and he knew how to use them.
The vocab he's got was brilliant.
I know.
I've no idea what he's talking about, but it sounded cool.
But we would ride down the road, and Brian would be reading one of those vocabulary books, and he'd know all the definitions to them. So he implemented that, and he worked at that. But from where he rubbed off on me was, I was like, okay, if I get to talk after Brian, well, I better bring something, or I'm going to look like a deaf mute, So, and then, after all that happened, and then I, went to ECW, that was kind of the path that Brian Pillman led me down. But, of course, then I created my own style, but inspired by Brian Pillman.
Yeah, let's talk about ECW, actually, because Paul Heyman does some stuff for us at the Sun.
I like Paul.
Yeah, I was chatting to him the other day, and I was saying I just rewatched your promo, long blonde hair, straight to camera one, downstairs in his basement, and he was saying he thinks that's the best promo you've ever cut. That, more than even 316, is what made you Steve Austin. Would you agree with that? That
promo was really paramount in the fact that it finally, I rolled into ECW, because I got the phone call as soon as I got fired from WCW. Phone rings, and it's Paul Lee. And he goes, Steve, why don't you come down and work for us at ECW? I said, man, Paul, I said, my arm's busted. I can't do anything. He goes, you don't have to work, cut promos. I just get to talk, and I'll get a paycheck, and I just cut promos. Okay, sounds good. I'm in. So we go down there, and it was about 4:30 in the morning. And he goes, Steve, you ready? I said, yeah. Yeah, I said, what do you want me to talk about? He goes, talk about anything you want. I said, well, talk about how you feel. And boom, for 6 or 8 minutes, however long that promo lasts, I did that promo. Never was a retake. That was the original. Only time I did it. Finally got a lot of stuff off my chest. I was watching the Legacy DVD the other day, and I watched that promo back, and I said...
You can see everybody cheering. By the way, the Legacy DVD is out now, but you can see the promo, and then you see everybody cheering, and Paul Heyman going, that was just...
But the thing was, when I said, there's nobody can hold me back, I'm going to be this, that, and whatever, I ended up doing exactly what I said I was going to do in the WWE, but I turned into a pretty good star.
Exactly. Now, if people haven't seen the DVD, I'd recommend it. The matches are brilliant, but that promo, people might not have seen it because we didn't get ECW over here at the time, I don't think. So it is amazing. Did Paul wind you up a lot beforehand, really get you going?
I was already wound up, man. If you get fired on the phone, I've heard Eric Bischoff do different versions of why I got fired, because I yelled at somebody on the phone, which is complete BS. When he's recanted the story later, about why I got fired to kind of cover his ass or whatever he's done, he'll make up some story about how I cussed so-and-so out or whatever. No, he fired me because I got hurt, and that's the bottom line. So it ended up being a real good thing.
Yeah, when I spoke to Ric Flair, he said when Bischoff first turned up in WWE, the whole locker room waiting to punch his lights out, led by Flair. Is that true?
Man, Eric's like a heat-seeking missile, he's really a good guy, but... yeah, he has a tendency to rub you the wrong way sometimes, and give him too much power, his head gets about this big, and look out.
Was it because of people in his ear, like maybe Hogan or Kevin Nash and stuff, or do you think he turned out the way he did, or do you think it just all went to his head?
I think it was a combination of everything. I think he had potential to just let his head get too big, and he had all those people winding him up, and when you look at where he came from, just being an announcer, and all of a sudden he's running WCW, what are his qualifications? So I mean, the guy was just trying to keep afloat, I think, and he stayed afloat for a pretty good while. He did a lot of good things, but then again, he was spending an unlimited amount of money. If he'd been on any kind of budget, I don't think it would have lasted as long as it did. Finally, Ted said, hey, man, we got to stop this.
How responsible do you think you are then for saving the WWE when you think about it? Because WWE was about dead and buried at that point. Nitro was just killing it, and then the Austin McMahon thing kicks off.
I pretty much heard, pretty much straight, from Vince that I don't want to, quote unquote, save the company, but I was very instrumental in turning that business around and for that company. So, and I don't ever blow my horn on stuff like that. I'll always talk about, my pay-per-view records or my merchandise records or sold-out arena records or stuff like that, because Eric Bischoff told me that I would never be marketable. I'll always talk about that.
Well, you were just a guy in black trunks and black boots.
Yeah, we can't market that.
Just recap some of those stats for people that might not know.
When the Stone Cold thing hit, it hit hard and fast, and it was like a rocket ride that was unbelievable, and no one's ever really done that. I mean, Hogan's had a real long career, and I give him all the credit in the world and respect for his career. He never really has anything nice to say about my run, which who cares, because I don't care what he says, but there's some kind of insecurity in his head, because that when that thing caught on with me, it wasn't the longest run in the world once I got hot, but it was so white hot. No one's ever done it before. I'm hoping someone will do it. I'd love to see someone light up and break every record that I ever set, because that's a great time for the business. Not that business is bad right now for them. I think John Cena's doing a good job, but when I hit it was like nothing I've ever experienced.
And you said about the Stone Cold, the name, and you're talking about your wife at the time. It was English, of course.
Yep.
Drink that cup of tea before it goes stone cold.
Yeah.
You're getting a list of names that have been faxed through. Was
Yeah.
it the Ice Dagger or the
Fang McFrost, Ice Dagger, Otto von Ruthless, some of the worst names I've ever heard in my life. And I was like, man, these guys are supposed to be creative geniuses.
No, but I couldn't believe there's like a directory of creativity for names and stuff at
I couldn't believe it either.
Yeah, it's like somebody comes up with these names. Now, you came in as the ringmaster with Ted DiBiase. Now, at the time, if I look back at those, you're a great worker, great matches, but in your eyes, you didn't look happy. And you come along there, and it was like, I'm just going back to square one again.
I was going back to square one, and I love Ted DiBiase because I love the $1 Million Man gimmick, and he's also one of my favorite workers. So it wasn't anything to do with Ted. It was just the fact that here I was. I knew when I came in, I thought that, they were going to call me the $1 Million Champion and really had plans for me. They didn't have any plans for me. I was using that stupid $1 Million Dream as my finish. And then all of a sudden, I've got Ted DiBiase talking for me. Well, I just got a chance to kind of start talking, and I was lighting it up in ECW. Now, all of a sudden, they think I'm a deaf mute, so Ted DiBiase is doing my talking. I'm not seeing a whole lot of room to grow there, or to ever turn into a main event or a guy that you can put on the marquee as the ringmaster.
Yeah.
Is coming to London. There's nowhere to go with that. And I saw the writing on the wall, but I give it a try for about 5 or 6 months, and then that's when I started thinking on my own. And I said, this ain't cutting it. So when I was watching that special on the serial killer, it came up with the Stone Cold concept. My wife at the time, came up with the name. But yeah, you got to think for yourself. And what gets me is when some of these guys go in there with these lame gimmicks, and they just stick with them for years and years and years. I'm like, man, go home and watch some DVDs or do something and come up with something on your own, because you don't have to wait for them to make you. They want you to make yourself and do whatever you can. Vince McMahon loves to see people kick, scratch, and claw their way to the top, because that's what the business is about, and that's what he likes.
Although if you're a young guy and they say you're going to be a pirate or a dancing girl, whatever, there must be a part of you that thinks, oh, look, Vince McMahon has asked me, I've got to do it.
He's not right on every single thing, so you can take what he says and say, yeah, that's a good idea. Is there any way I can improve it? But the truth is, just most people come in, they're so blown away that it is the WWE, it is the major leagues of professional wrestling, and that is Vince McMahon, the powerful Vince McMahon saying, this is what you're going to be. I'm not going to argue with this guy because I don't know him. He's just going to fire me. So it's just a complete intimidation factor. And that being said, not that he's trying to be intimidating, it's just when you walk in there and all of a sudden you're at the Holy Grail, you're going to do what they tell you. Do that long enough until you get your feet wet and say, okay, let's try this. He'll always listen to you.
Now, if Vince had turned around to you and said, look, Steve, you've either got to be the ringmaster Otto Van Ruthless, you can't do Stone Cold, you can't do this gimmick, would you have walked, or would you have just...
Boy, I'd have been the best damn Otto Van Ruthless you ever saw.
Sharp Boy. I want to bring up Sharp Boy because, what's your thoughts on Sharp Boy? Have you seen it?
I'd been hearing about it, and at first I said, well...
Kurt said he'd seen you and didn't have the balls to tell you.
Oh, at the UFC?
UFC thing. Yeah. Kurt said, I saw Steve, I didn't want to bring it up.
Well, you know who I talked to? I talk to Kevin Nash all the time.
Yeah.
We probably talk at least once a week. And but I'd heard about the Shark Boy thing because I'd gotten a few emails. So first me, I kind of started thinking, you know what? I don't know if I like that. Someone's kind of ripping my deal off. But then I thought about it for a while. Then I saw it.
Yeah.
It made me laugh. Hell, I think he needs to do a little bit better of a job.
Yeah.
But no, and mimic me, rip me off, make fun of me, whatever it is, in whatever vein it is, I could care less. More power to the guy if he can make a paycheck doing it. I did what I did, had a fun time doing it. I'm not going to take myself so serious that, someone copies Stone Cold Steve Austin's gimmick and all of a sudden I'm all ticked off about it. Nah, good luck to him.
Santino, now that was a rip-off. That made me laugh so much. He was absolutely
made me laugh.
brilliant. The way he ripped on you, ripped on the movie, everything. It was absolutely brilliant.
I watched him start doing that from week one, and really the thing that impressed me was watching him improve from the first one he did to the time we ended up in the ring. That guy's hilarious. I mean, I think really his strength should be more as a manager, because I don't think he's going to be a big money draw as a wrestler, just from his size, his look. And I'm not cutting the kid down because I'm a fan of his. I just think that he's going to be better served in a managerial role with the complete ad-lib ability, and just turn him loose, let that guy run his mouth, because when he's running his mouth, people are entertained.
This is the way they got the movie over. Now, we talked about this off the air. First off, there's Vinnie Jones, and we're trying to promote it on Raw to the wrestling fans. And as you know, wrestling fans are the most loyal people in the world. They will go and see the movie. They'll buy the DVD. But what about the mainstream? Why was it not pushed in the States?